While most of the country is bracing themselves for the winter storms that are rolling in, this is where I think Louisiana really shines, because most people in Louisiana, especially Northeast Louisiana, this is about where we say, we'll figure it out. And honestly, I think it's that mindset that really makes living here so unique. And it really does pay off, especially as it influences real estate. Natural disasters in Louisiana is just a given, from tornadoes to hurricanes to ice and snow. And then of course, we have flooding. And so it's not our first rodeo. And I think the resiliency that breeds in our culture, especially living in Louisiana, is what makes it so interesting to live here. Let's talk about how Northeast Louisiana handles natural disasters and what buyers and sellers really need to know. And it's especially important to keep these things in mind whenever you're actually considering a move. Both, what can you do to, one, make sure you're prepared for a natural disaster, but also when you're selling, what's considered a pro? And then when you're buying, what should you be looking for? If you live here long enough, while I think that there's a healthy degree of respect for what a storm can do, you'll find that it's not just terror and scary all the time. It's actually pretty communal. What's really interesting about Louisiana is we are made with a very different culture. I've lived across the different states, and I think the thing that always brings me back to Northeast Louisiana is the rich culture. And part of that culture is part of how people behave and they treat one another. And part of that's hospitality, because you will see people coming out of the woodwork, whether it's your neighbors, people you've never met. Everyone is here to help everyone move on and be able to rebuild. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about living here. Louisiana is its own magical place. We have drive-through daiquiris, and then of course we have Mardi Gras. Everybody likes to have a good time, and we might be sweating like nobody's business in the summer because it's hot as bananas, but we're always going to find that silver lining. There's always going to be that possible thing. And I think it's just because it's really runs through all of our blood. It's just how we were made. And it's part of that hospitality that just naturally comes out. And when disasters blow through, you see it in the response system. You have churches that are coming together. Your neighbors are showing up. People you never thought are in your yard helping you pull trees out of the ditch and do whatever it is. And we find that we rebuild really quickly. We pick back up, and it's just another state of mind. And you'll actually find that a lot of times we turn these natural disasters, they're all about community. And it's before the thing happens. It's what kind of party are we having? This is another reason to be able to celebrate something. And I think it's part of that silver lining that you see. While disasters come in, we rally. And I think what's really made me proud, whenever you think of national headlines, anything that impacts Louisiana, you may see us after the disaster and it's going to make headlines and there's going to be news crews there. But I think what you see in the background are all the locals that are helping everyone around them, right? There are no strangers in this town. It's very much, I'm here for you. How can we help? And I think that's a beautiful thing about where we live. You have your storm parties, you have your community that comes in, we share freezers, whatever it takes for us all to get through that rough patch and then carry on. But here's some things that you're definitely going to want to know as you're bracing yourself for storms. Talk about the type of inclement weather that we actually get. And while we get the tornadoes, we get the hurricanes, it's really the flooding that makes us most at risk in Northeast Louisiana. It's the thing that you really want to pay attention to. But here's some things that you want to keep in mind about all the different natural disasters that tend to happen in our area. Tornadoes, they're short-lived, they're very localized in the sense that the damage is very specific to a particular area. And whenever it comes to tornadoes, I've been through a few. We've had, growing up, had them hit our house. We had a trampoline that flew over the house and into the pool, and it was a 2-story house, mind you. So that's interesting. And those can be scary. However, again, it's that rebuild, and then also being mindful of the property that you're choosing. I know a lot of times I get people who are considering mobile homes and they want to know how safe they are. There have been very different guidelines about how mobile homes are installed and properly tied down because of storms versus maybe whenever I was growing up and I think of grandma's house and all the horror stories you hear. So it's just something to keep in mind, but a lot of the building restrictions have adjusted because they are common in our area. Then, of course, you have hurricanes. And most of the time, we're not getting a surge up this far. And they've died down by the time we get there, but we get the after effects. We get the rain, we get the wind. And a lot of times, you're going to notice there's a lot of hurricane damage. And we'll talk a little bit about insurance a little bit later, but this is something you want to pay attention to, especially when you're purchasing a home. What is the condition of the roof? Where is it in relation to trees? All those different things are going to come into impact. Then of course we have ice and snow, which is the topic that we're currently in whenever this video is being recorded. And while snow's pretty rare, I like to think about every 5 years we get snow. When we get snow, we're talking like it's gonna be gone tomorrow. You better enjoy it while you can. It's not inches. It melts very quickly. The real danger becomes with the ice, right? We end up with ice storms, it ends up getting power out, and we're just not built for that type of weather here. And so you really do shut down and end up hibernating your house more than likely, or you pull out the four-wheelers and you of course have some kind of snow party because everybody's taking off, nobody's going to work. It is Louisiana, which means it comes with some severe heat. And that's just a given. I guess technically that would be inclement weather, but I'm just so used to 110 in August and we don't leave our homes. You get a little bit used to it. But of course, there is the heat, and you want to pay attention to this whenever you're thinking about shingles being installed properly, because I've had a few properties where ridge vents were not done and it ends up melting from the inside. You lose granule loss, and we have a roof that was only 5 years old and it had lost at least 10 to 15 years of its life. And lastly, the biggest risk for our area is definitely flooding. And flooding's an interesting thing. One block can be completely different than the other, and you want to understand what's flood zones. What's the classification? What's the likelihood? And has it happened before? Just because it didn't get classified by FEMA doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at the history of those things. And we'll talk about how you find out that information. But all of these are the different types of weather that we endure. And because of it, so many different things, I think that's how we become so resilient. Is it happens, it sucks, we all move on, but we find a positive spin with it. So regardless of the type of storm, afterward, one of the biggest mistakes I see homeowners make is not their insurance, it's who they hire to do the work. There are lots of companies out that they actually chase storms so that they can take your money, do a shitty job, leave town, and you never hear from them again. And now you're left chasing them to do a job. We don't want storm chasers that you have to chase. We want to make sure that we're getting local help, experienced and notable vendors to do the work. After major storms, you're going to see everybody flood in. You're going to see signs everywhere. Get your roof done, get trees done. And you want to pay attention to who you're hiring. Make sure that they're properly insured. Are they permitted? And are they local? Are they going to stick around and guarantee the work that they're providing? The other thing that I see a lot with storms, my father owns raw stump grinding. I'm very familiar with the tree business because of course they go hand in hand. I see the tree companies that come in and they go wild. But then you also see the tree companies that increase their prices because of the storm, and they start to storm gouge, and they may even charge different areas different prices. You want to be very mindful and make sure you get good reviews from whoever it is that you're hiring, whether it's for roofs, debris removal, or trees. Those are the most common that we see. And then the ones that matter the most, you don't want a tree that has already fallen that you're trying to get removed going through your house that survived the storm. Make sure you're hiring the right type of help. And your real estate agent should be able to provide you good vendors if they do this on a regular basis, because we interact with everybody and their mama, right? And the risk here is not only that you get a job improperly done, maybe they don't warranty their work, but it can also influence your insurance. And there's a lot of changes that have happened around roofs. We'll talk about that a little bit later with the insurance, but you just want to make sure that you're protecting yourself after a storm by hiring the right type of people. There are companies that chase storms and then they leave you chasing them. Don't hire those people. Paying a premium during a storm doesn't mean that you're getting premium work. You want to make sure you vet anyone that you're calling. And after a storm, it can feel like I've got to get this fixed right now because there's a tree in my living room. But you want to make sure that you slow down and that you're hiring reputable people. So what do sellers need to think about? Now, we are in generator country. People love their generators. They're going to brag about their generator. They're going to brag about how much of their house their generator powers, because everybody knows the best commodity that you have in a storm is electricity. Heat, hot water, which of course if you have gas you're good, and then who can actually charge all of their phones, and how long is it going to be out? Because we do have areas that are rural where you could be out for weeks, and it was just a small storm that blew through. So you want to make sure you're protected. So generators are a wonderful thing that sellers can add, and these really do attract a lot of buyers considering your property. However, does it stay or does it go? I get sellers all the time that are like, oh, I'm taking the Generac, right? Because they are expensive. That's fine if you want to take it. You know, that's your own decision you can make. However, I would argue that it could be a big selling point for a lot of buyers. Get one for your next house, you'll be okay. However, if you're going to take it, you probably better go ahead and make sure that bad boy cannot be seen when you do showings, because I can guarantee they're going to ask for it and they're probably going to really push for it. Also, whenever you're installing a generator, you want to think about, is it going to be a partial home, a whole home? And it may be worth the splurge because of how attractive it can be to be able to power your entire house with a generator. Generators can be a huge selling factor, especially for buyers that are searching and if you're outside of city limits. However, they can hurt you if there's a safety issue or they weren't installed properly. Make sure you hire a professional to install your generator. Too often I hear sellers that are like, we're just gonna plug that baby in. You can't just plug it into your house and you're ready to go. Make sure that there is a transfer switch. You do not want back feeding electricity in. It puts you at risk. It also puts utility workers at risk. Make sure that you are taking safety precautions for the thing that is supposed to be able to help you during a natural disaster. There are so many safety concerns that have recently come up with generators and people trying to do it themselves. And that could be anything from carbon monoxide poisoning all the way to fire hazards. So make sure that if you're going to add this thing that can attract people to your home, that you do it properly. Another opportunity is being mindful of what kind of appliances are you installing. And gas, a lot of times, is very desirable. Not all neighborhoods have gas, but if you do, you may even want to consider a gas stove or making sure that your water heater stays gas. A lot of times I see folks that convert them back to electricity. Sometimes it's because of the cost they were quoted. However, that is a pro. That means lights go out, I can still have a hot shower. That's important to buyers, and they're going to look for that. And of course, for our sellers, it all comes down to disclosures. Make sure that you're tracking the storms and what you've had done. Too many times people try to fill out the disclosures and they forget that you're supposed to do everything since you've been in that property. If you've been there a long time, you might have been through a few different storms. So make sure you give yourself credit. Did you get the roof done? You want to make sure to specify anything that you improved and were able to do during those natural disasters afterwards. Buyers aren't scared of storms. In most of our disclosures, you're going to see that there was wind damage, hurricane damage, something that's pretty expected. What they are wary of are surprises. So clean disclosures, make sure that they're clear and make sure that you're honest, trustworthy, you report everything. But make sure you keep good records so that you can refer that to the next buyer. It's going to make them feel comfortable and like you're being forthcoming, which you should always be. In our area, there are 2 pages fully dedicated to flooding in Louisiana in our property disclosures. 2 full pages. So you want to know, was there a grant? Have they made any claims before? And all of those things your agent should be checking on, but I don't just rely on the disclosures. I also want to go into the FEMA flood maps and I want to see for myself where you're at, because maybe you're not technically in a designated flood zone, but I want to know if I'm surrounded by a flood zone. Like, if everybody else floods, great, I didn't. Can I even get out and go anywhere? That's also important and something that you're going to want to pay attention to. So what about buyers? You're going to pay attention to what neighborhood you're choosing. Most of our utilities are above ground, but we do have neighborhoods that run the utilities underground, which means you're much less likely to lose power. So do you know what those neighborhoods are? And do you specifically want to look in them? Buyers also often look for gas appliances. This way, whenever the electricity's out, you can still cook and you can still at least have hot water. So just being mindful of what type of options you have. Whenever you're searching for homes, pay attention to the proximity of large trees. I'm okay with trees. We're in Louisiana. We're rural. Most people don't want to just see their neighbors, especially if you're out in the country. However, you want to pay attention to how big that tree is and how close it is to your house and what side of your house. I don't want big pine trees that are very mature and older and tall, ideally not the tallest thing that's close by, right next to all the bedrooms, right? So you just want to pay attention to that and consider, are you going to get those removed? Because it's not cheap to remove trees. We've already talked about flooding, but even drainage issues. So maybe you're not in a flood zone, but how does the land drain? And a lot of your telltale signs is, do you see moss? I'm always looking for moss on the ground. And do you see clovers? Does it look like the water has a place to go? If it has gutters, I love gutters, but sometimes it indicates that there was an issue. So which of those is true? Does it look like they ran it properly? Do you have gutter shields? I want to see, are they actually under the ground, or does it look like they did it just as a last attempt to be able to fix a drainage issue? Then lastly, think about elevation-wise. Are you at the bottom of the hill? Is everybody's water going to go into your yard? Does it look like everything's coming this way? You kind of want to try to pay attention to floodplains. I tell folks all the time, if you want to go look at houses, don't cancel on the rainy day. That is the best day to go look at a house, because if you like it on a rainy day, you're going to love it on a sunny day. And it gives you a great chance to be able to see where is the rain running off to. Just a quick reality check. Our friend Zillow has a section now about inclemental weather, and they pulled this from a third-party source. It comes in from First Street. And one of the things I do appreciate is they seem to have reneged a little bit. It still links to that website, but it no longer shows the results. I found that this was so frequently wrong, like really wrong. Basically anything that wasn't in the city center, they're like, yeah, you're probably going to have wind, probably going to be fire, probably going to be hot. Yeah. And basically they're putting everything as like a 7 out of 10. And so you just want to pay attention to what source you're actually using. Is an actual authority source? Because I had too many listings that I've had to argue with them about flood zones. I'm like, it's a flood zone X. It has never flooded. They're on top of a hill. And I think that they just see you're in Louisiana. We're not real sure. Good luck. And so make sure that you're getting the right source for information and not just some online general, they're like pulling a logarithm. No, I want details. Is this going to affect insurance? Do I need flood insurance? Like telling me actual information. I appreciate that they've now taken most of that off their website, but if you see it there and you click along, I find that's not very trustworthy. Then of course in the disclosures, you want to pay attention to, have there been storm repairs? Probably so, but more particularly, I want to understand who did it. Was it done properly? Was it permitted? And especially when it comes to roof, there have been a lot of law changes around roofing, and you want to make sure that you're going to be covered by your insurance and you haven't gotten into any issues because it was improperly installed. Not all storm repairs are created equal. That's going to be in your disclosures where they talk about what they had done, if anything, but you want to be mindful of who did it and was it done properly? Does it just look pretty, or did they rip out all the sheetrock if there was flooding in the home? You want to pay attention to how it was done, and was it quality, or did they just put some, lipstick on a pig and make it look okay? I want details. I want to know how much you spent. Okay, your whole house flooded and you spent 10 grand. Come on now. I've referenced this a few times, but let's talk insurance. Insurance is a big part of the buying decision. It's going to influence your payment. It also matters what type of coverage you got. Like, do you have enough for where we live? Because we do get this inclement weather and you want to pay attention to it. Do you have your homeowners? Does it cover wind, hurricane? And there's lots of little fine print about those things. And then do you need flood insurance? That's going to be something separate. Some policies, especially flood policies, can transfer, and that's usually much more affordable, but you want to make sure that you're going to be able to get insurance if you need insurance. Roofs matter because they do affect your eligibility. They also affect your premiums. Do you know how old the roof is? Do you know who put it in? And now there's a lot of rules that it has to be installed properly to keep a lot of those storm chasers who run off and didn't do it properly from being able to get all the business and take your money. There have been regulatory changes around roofing, specifically about how a contractor has to be licensed. Not just anyone can do it. Did you know that there are only 3 in Northeast Louisiana that actually have the correct licensing as of today? That's pretty significant. If you want a deeper dive on roofs and insurance changes, drop roofs in the comments and we'll circle back to this because it's a big deal. And I feel like most people do not know, including real estate agents. So consider who you're hiring. Insurance doesn't kill deals, but confusion and uncertainty does. Make sure that you've documented your stuff as a seller, and as a buyer, make sure you're informed about what your options are. But really, at the end of the day, we're headed into the snowstorm and everybody's like, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm good. I'm going to sit with a book, either in the electricity or not, because I do not have a generator. And I think one of the beautiful things is just how resilient Louisiana is overall, and especially our hometown area of Northeast Louisiana. And of course, the best transactions happen when buyers are informed, sellers are prepared, and expectations are realistic. All the things that you need for a natural disaster have now become pros for buyers, and making sure that you set yourself up for success. If you're thinking of selling or buying in Northeast Louisiana and you want to make sure that you understand the realities of these things and how that affects you in real estate and with your decisions, make sure that you reach out. I'm happy to walk you through specific situations that affect you.